We couldn't start until the Grabowskis arrived. So I just want to welcome all of you out there, all of you gathered together in this sanctuary again. What a treat, what a treat. Is the mic on? Yes? I'll stand a little closer. Easy enough. And I'm the only short, well, not the only, I'm one of the short practitioners, so the mic is perfectly attuned to me, and the taller people have a little more challenge, but anyway. So I want to welcome you. My name is Sara Gorham. I am a licensed practitioner here at Light in the Mountains, and it is my great joy to be here and to invite us to take this moment, to take a deep cleansing breath, to release whatever hurry you might have participated in to get here at this appointed hour, and to just know that we reside in peace. At all times, that peace of the divine is always at hand, because the divine is always at hand. We live, move, and have our being within that divine spirit. We are of that. We are blessed by that. We are constantly supported by that. And I know that divine energy to be all love, all peace, all inclusion, all unity, all creativity, and joyful expression. I see that in every face in this room. I see it in the glory of this morning. And I give thanks for that. I give thanks for this gathering of souls, for this sanctuary that welcomes us all, for our wonderful musicians, for the stewards of this place who serve in many ways on the council, as volunteers, as practitioners. And I give thanks for Reverend John as he captains our ships throughout the week and shares his wisdom with us today. For all these things, I know how blessed we are, and I invite us all to give thanks. And together we say, and so it is. So I think all of you have on your chair this little insert, and it's got the June 2021 theme, which is the soul's call, which, nerd that I am, I actually think of a lot. And at any rate, so it was fun to ponder that. And these were my thoughts. We often hear it said that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, but I often wonder just how good we really are at balancing those two aspects of our being. Do we make our decisions and form our responses from a place where our humanity and our divinity operate in equal partnership? Or do we pretty much concede all ground to the personality level self, the self that sees itself as separate and therefore in need of constant bolstering against a world that we have come to believe offers a limited supply of everything: love, connection, money, opportunity, peace? My question is, what would happen if we allowed the knowing of our soul to inform the thinking of our mind? For the soul knows that it is inseparable from Source. It knows that it is of God and forever loved, supported, and intertwined with all of life. What the soul does not know is fear, for fear cannot exist within the embrace of the divine. Now, we all experience ourselves at the level of the personality self, and one assumes we are having this experience by choice and for a reason: to learn and evolve, to expand into greater possibility, and to simply be in joy and revel at the very experience of life on earth. So the point is never to deny life at the level of the personality self, but to allow that aspect of ourselves to be nurtured and supported by the wisdom and perspective of the soul, our constant partner on this journey. We've all seen those bumper stickers that say, "What would Buddha do?" or "What would Jesus do?" But I think what is really being asked on those bumper stickers is, what would your soul choose? What would that part of you choose that does not judge or fear or diminish the self or others? And can we learn to attend to our own inner counsel? For millennia, our evolution as a species has revolved around tweaks and upgrades to the physical. But I believe we are now shifting to the evolution of consciousness, to how we express in our wholeness, how our humanity and our divinity twine and expand to an expression beyond fear and separation. Perhaps one might think that sounds too grand or theoretical to apply to our everyday lives, but bringing that into being, in fact, requires not so much effort as awareness, where we are invited to stop and ask the question, what would my soul choose? And then we listen. And when we listen, I think we'll hear something like this: release and allow. Release those erroneous assumptions that no longer serve us, the fears, the judgments, the hoarding, the belief in our own smallness and aloneness, and then simply allow the constant givingness that is the very nature of the universe to fill us with its blessings, which we, in turn, as part of that divine flow, can fearlessly share with the world, knowing that all those things we once thought were limited are ours in constant and abundant supply. And now it's time to say our affirmation together, which is on the little sheet on your chair on the flip side under order of service and in red. Everybody's got it. I learn from my challenges and then use them as the seeds of a life of greater purpose and meaning. And since Nelda is here, I certainly am not going to not say it in Spanish. Aprendo de mis retos y entonces los uso como las amigas para una vida de propósito y significado más grande. Amen.
Thank you, RL. Thank you, Max. Hi, everybody. If I've not met you, I'm Reverend John. And a colleague of mine had something really interesting to say about this. There's this thing of, if you've come to the door the first time, are you new? Well, we're kind of like all new. I mean, really, it's like, what are we supposed to do here? Didn't somebody used to make coffee around here? Or yeah, I mean, it's just, we're all new. So we're all trying to figure it out, and I think that's a good thing. First, I wanted to share with you what I did last night. It's wedding season. I do a lot of weddings. Last year, even with COVID, I did 21 weddings. I know, it's pretty amazing. And not the Sun Valley, everyone dancing bears and elephants down the aisle kind of weddings. Very nice, intimate, less than 10 guests, more often than not just the couple. And most of the weddings I do are on the beach at Redfish Lake. And so I have to tell you that this last year, doing that has been a great source of personal joy for me. But last night was really extra special, and that's why I have to tell you about it. So I did it at one of my new, not so new, but newer favorite spots in Stanley. So if you go to Lower Stanley, and you drive, and it's, I mean, if you blink, you leave Lower Stanley. But when you're half blinked, there is one place where you can turn left, and it's called Nip and Tuck Road. Why they call it, I don't know. And if you drive up about 10 minutes, there is this wonderful little small field and overlook that has the most amazing view of the Sawtooth Mountains you could ever imagine. And of course, this time of year, everything was green, and there's still snow on the top of the mountains, and it was just perfect. And we timed it for dusk, so there'd be perfect pictures for the photographer. And so it was the bride and the groom, and I think about 8 or 9 family and friends, and plus the photographer. And the couple were in their late 30s, and the bride had 2 children from a previous marriage, and they were there, and they were, it's hard for me to estimate, 12, 13-ish tweens. And as I was working with the couple to plan the ceremony, and that's one of the great things, is to go back and forth and see, okay, what makes this special to you? They wanted it to be that it was a marriage not just for them, but for their new family. And so I created vows for the family, which was really wonderful. But then it really went a place that I didn't know it was going to, that was just brought it to such a deeper place. So we did some vows for the family, and then the bride and the groom, they created their own vows. And of course, those kind of vows aren't like, formal. It's just basically speaking from your heart of what this means for you. And at this point, we had planned that we would do a ring exchange, which had also some actual vows with it. And the groom said, well, wait a second, let's just stop here for a moment. That's always kind of shocking in the middle of the ceremony. He's like, Okay, we were Yeah, I know. I think I've learned to. Anything can happen between dogs, children, and that happens during the thing. But he said he wanted to bring the two kids closer in. They were right there, and I'm trying to remember just to quote what he started off. He says to the two, just looking directly in their eyes, he says, "You two have been through hell and back, and I want to change that for you." Says, and so apparently there was trouble or difficult relationship with the birth father. He says, "Please give me the privilege of being your dad. Please, not only do I want to be your dad, I want to be grandfather of your kids. Please trust me." And they just, and this never happens at a wedding, so the four of them were just kind of in this group hug, and the kids, I mean, everyone, of course, crying. It's like, my job is supposed to be like the voice of reason to hold it together. It's like, okay, we passed that moment. But as you know, sometimes young kids, especially tweens, they don't know quite how to process rich emotional moments, and sometimes they almost go blank because they don't know what to do. But these kids were so present and crying with the rest of us, and then hugging this guy and just calling him dad for the first time. And it was just like, whoa. You know, I think the marriage has been done at this point. Of course, we had a little bit more business to take care of this. But the point of bringing this, and it just speaks to what I wanted to talk about, is that at this moment, with people that I virtually did not know, I mean, we had met with Zoom and all that to plan the wedding, that we were all elevated to this higher energetic of pure joy. That I didn't know them per se, but suddenly I did know them. And for me, there was such a connection to that. They could call me anytime and say, "Reverend John, could you help me with whatever?" I said, "Yeah, I'm there." I would get in the car and go. I mean, there's just this, it was such a gift of all of us being present that it was just amazing. And this relates perfectly with our theme this month of, we call a soul's call, or call of the soul, that basically what that is, I mean, there's so many things that can be, is that it calls us to live a life at a higher vibration. And to leave some of this junk that we carry with us behind. And we carry it even though we know we shouldn't be carrying it. But just think, so if that story really spoke to you, and I can kind of feel the energy elevating in the room, and you didn't even meet the people, and you weren't there, and it was like, oh, what can I do for them? If you came in the room this morning with something troubling with you, or that you were concerned about, or a health problem, for a few moments, you couldn't be there. I mean, think of that. You couldn't go to that place of, oh, there's something wrong in my life. You allowed yourself to get caught up into something larger. And so a soul's call isn't, in a sense, that you deny that we have just some human business to take care of, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. But the call is to take it from a higher calling, a higher energetic, that suddenly the things that seem wrong or bad or a challenge seem doable, solvable, livable somehow. I mean, complete opposite of when we get in the muck of it all. So in the soul call, it involves things of like meaning and purpose and getting out of our petty humanness sometimes. And this whole last year, I guess you could say, our subject has been the soul's call. Our whole life has been the soul's call, actually. And if you look at your own life, you probably had moments that you had a higher elevation, and moments that you were just stuck in your humanness. Like, meh, vaccines, masks, this, that, I can't do this, I can't, just, and we get stuck there. And so this experience has called us to be at a higher elevation. So I started a really great book this week, wrote about it in my blog that speaks about this. And so I'm really looking forward to see how this goes. So the book was by David Brooks, called The Second Mountain, The Quest for a Moral Life. Does anyone know who David Brooks is by any chance? So this is what's so funny with him writing this book. Well, not funny. You know how you pigeonhole people? Well, actually, he wrote a great book that I brought into a Sunday service a couple of years ago called, what was it called? I can't remember. But it was a similar kind of thing. But it was about a moral calling, so to speak. So David Brooks is a op-ed columnist for the New York Times. You may have seen him on various news shows. He, in the past, has often been, I guess, the conservative voice on sometimes more liberal shows. And of course, as he even said in this book, what does liberal or conservative mean anymore? I really don't know, honestly. Everything's exploded that we don't know even know what those words mean. And these two books, and particularly this one, talking about his own growth as a human being. And he's really careful not to bring it down to religious or spiritual growth. I think he wants it to be, something that everyone can take in, whether you focus on your spirituality or just in a secular way as being a good person. And I really appreciate that. So everyone can get on board with this a little bit. And he gives this analogy of, it says here, the second mountain, or these two mountains of being here. And looking at his own life and how many of us will have a progress in his, book of going from the first mountain to the second mountain. Now, he presents his own personal growth as very linear. And I have found that growth is often really not linear. It's like, okay, maybe here, and I have an elevated moment in here, and suddenly I'm like jagging back to where I was before, to look at it even more deeply. So it's really almost a false thing to say, I leave this thing behind completely and I never go back, that it's always here. It's kind of like up, 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 then here we go again, it's up, up here, and here we go again, kind of thing. That's how I have found it to be. But he looks at this first mountain is, in a sense, what we are raised, in a sense, to be concerned about. And this is what he has to say about it. The goals of the first mountain are the normal goals that our culture endorses to be a success, to be well thought of, to get invited into the right social circles, and to experience personal happiness. It's all normal stuff. Nice home, nice family, nice vacations, good food, good friends, and so on. And then he says something happens. So let's look at the first mountain before. The first mountain's great. I want good food. I want a nice home. I want to know when I get into my car that I'm actually going to make my destination because it's in good functioning order. Don't you? I don't think there's anything spiritual about my car breaking down on the highway in a snowstorm, necessarily. I mean, those are just things that we want and need to have, in a sense, to just make life on planet Earth as a physical person work. And we were raised to think that's all that there is. And as he looks at this here, the part I really want to look at today, he contrasts seeking happiness with the spontaneous feeling of joy. There's an experience, as we'll go into, of the two mountains. The first mountain is more about happiness is an effect. It's something that we as humans see as happening when we get what we want. In fact, if you're feeling a little like about life, it's not quite right, I need to make a change, the question you often we ask ourselves, or maybe a friend, if they're going through something, like a transition, well, what would make you happy? Isn't that the question we ask? What would make you happy? Would this type of job make me happy? Would this type of house make me happy? If my family did this, would that make me happy? And we all do it. We make this thing of, I would be happy if. And I won't be happy if this sort of thing doesn't happen. But to a certain sense, when we look at financial gain, it's actually been proven to a certain level, it actually does make you happy. Let's just stay with me for a moment. And I read a scientific study with this, maybe 5 years ago. I remembered it from back then because it really made an impression on me. So if you or your family has ever had food insecurity, if you've ever were in peril of losing your housing, if just the thought of you or your kids getting sick terrified you because you didn't have health insurance, but then your financial situation changed and those things weren't so anymore in your life. So getting a certain amount of money to that level makes you happier. My kids have food. We have a house that we don't have to worry about getting evicted from. In fact, you might even own the house. And we don't want anyone to get sick, but it's not going to bankrupt us. So in a sense, financial gain to a certain point does make us happy. There's a relief, a loss of a certain amount of worry. But this study that I read a few years ago, they actually gave a dollar amount. I don't remember what it was or how it would adjust for inflation. But they said at this particular dollar amount, that stopped being so. That even though it stopped being so, we as humans kind of got used to this idea that my conditions getting better through financial gain created happiness to this point, so it should create happiness when I go to the other points. And that's where, in a sense, that we need to start seeking what we look at the second mountain. But we're often slow learners. We get really stuck on this first mountain. Like being able to have a house for my kids made me happy, so 5 houses for my kids would make me even more happy. But it doesn't work that way, in a sense. And as David Brooks put it, we're presented with an advertising and all sorts of things, of visions or pictures of lives that aren't ours, and somehow we've convinced ourselves, I would be happy if I had that in my life. I like the way he put this. So he said, talking about a magazine rack at a store. Yes, there's still printed magazines at the store. Says, the magazines on the magazine rack want people to ask, what can I do to make myself happy? So after reading this, I went to the grocery store this week, and I went to the magazine rack because I never go there anymore. And I looked, with fresh eyes, and it just seemed like every magazine cover was a window into a life I don't have. You think about it. It's idealizing life in some way. So, of course, I go to the exercise ones first. There's a very handsome young man there that has never had an ounce of body fat in his life. And, of course, without a shirt. And the article says, get rock hard abs in 2 weeks. I want rock hard abs. If I spend $7 on this magazine, will it make me happier? Will I look like this great man that just somehow was birthed this way and just kind of, I don't know, or ascended from above like this? And we do that. It's like, come on, you've all bought a magazine or an article or, take this one pill. It'll make you do whatever, that you know logically that it's not going to do anything for you, but something about buying the magazine, rock hard abs, $7, and it never really happens. But then there's architectural books that just have these amazing homes on them, or a celebrity that you might resonate with sitting in his or her, living room at their coffee table with a cup of coffee, and you just go, what a perfect picture. I don't look at that like that when I'm sitting on my couch with coffee at 6 a.m. I really don't. Hair like this, shorts, T-shirt that's ripped up. I don't look like that. And again, my life would be so much happier if I looked like that. And you may not do that consciously, but we all do it to a certain extent. We see something that's presented to us as a perfect life in our eyes, and we think, if I only had that, it would be better. And sometimes we do get that thing, whatever it is, that perfect life or that perfect picture, and you go it, and here they are, the abs, I got them, but there's still something missing. So we go to another magazine cover. Maybe if I get this magazine cover, it'll feel right. Remember years ago I had a client, a different profession that had been going under some emotional counseling, and she had fallen into this, and she was sharing with me that she just started roaming the malls, buying stuff, that somehow that would make her life better. And for 30 seconds when she brought home this great package she'd have wrapped at Macy's, it would be exciting, and it's unwrapped and it's on her bed, and it's like, next. It was fleeting. And that how she had to work through this idea that just having more beyond our basic needs somehow created happiness in our lives. So that is a sign that you're looking for what David Brooks refers to as the second mountain. The mountain of greater meaning, of greater purpose, of seeking not on the outside, but something that wells up from the inside. And one of the things that we have to get over from that viewpoint is to believe or think that we have to go someplace else to feel fulfilled. In fact, I mean, yes, sometimes in our life, we do need to go someplace else. And probably none of us, well, most of us, were not born in this community. We found our way here. So we did go someplace else. But probably not with this idea of, gee, I will only be happy if I somehow find another place. We just kind of found our way here somehow. So part of this is to get over this idea that you have to go someplace else. That the challenging part of this mountain is to realize that it's right where you are, regardless of what's happening in your life. And this is how he talks about staying on the second mountain and finding it where you are. He says, still others stay in the same job and their same marriages, but are transformed. It's not about self anymore. It's about a summons. If they are principals of a school, their joy is in seeing their teachers shine. If they work in a company, they no longer see themselves as managers, but as mentors. Their energies are devoted to helping others get better. They want their organization to be thick places where people find purpose, and not thin places where people come to just draw a salary. He goes on later and he says, it's about a different kind of commitment. He says, a commitment is making a promise to something without expecting a reward. So it brings us to a place like the wedding last night. Oh my God, I'm still high off of this. A place of great purpose, and to find it where you are. Another interesting part of this analogy, you've got the two mountains. Again, this is very linear, I know. Never works out quite this way. It says, so to get from mountain one to mountain two, you have to go in the valley. That's where we get messed up. Because it looks, you're on the mountain, look at that mountain peak over there. Can I just take a tram? Can I zip line over there? Can I just go? And so when he gave this analogy of doing our work in the valley, I thought just of the physicalness of growing up in the Los Angeles area. So the Los Angeles area, they often will call it, the Los Angeles Basin, meaning that it is kind of flattish, hilly, but it's surrounded by mountains. And so it's a basin, like a bowl. And even if you've not been there, it's known for its smog. And this is why it's known for its smog. So you have all this stuff coming up from cars and things, and we'll have these, and they get stuck in this, between these mountains here. And then for added fun, we get inversion layers, where the air pushes down on all that mess of smog and factory stuff, and it doesn't move. And it gets really nasty. And there were many times in my life when I was living there, you'd go for a day drive, and you drive up into the mountains, and you'd go above the smog line. And it was really kind of almost frightening a little bit. So you'd be up here, and it would be like here. Look outside. Beautiful blue, crystal clear skies. You'd look at the mountain peaks over there, and they're amazing. And then there was this line that where the smog was that you often, in its worst days, you couldn't even see through. That on a clear day, you would be able to see the expanse of the Pacific Ocean, even though it was miles away. It would almost feel like you could touch it. And up there, you couldn't even see a shine off of the ocean. And as you're standing there in this beautiful air thinking, that's where I live. And even worse, I'll be back there later on today. But it's great for the analogy, because when you're on the high peaks of it, joy sounds great and doable. Living with purpose sounds great and doable. Not so much when you're below the smog line. So I don't know if any of you have lived in a place like that. So I grew up there in the 60s and 70s. And so imagine my brother and sister and I riding our bicycles home from school on a 90-degree day, on a smog day, and of course going to Catholic schools where the corduroy pants were about this thick. So we got home wheezy and cranky. And thank God my parents' home did have air conditioning. You'd be kind of like in lung therapy for about an hour, like, after that drive. So when you were wheezy and cranky, it's hard to think about joy, life purpose, fulfilling your life in wonderful, meaningful ways, because you just want to be able to breathe. So that is the challenge of this, that sometimes we are stuck under this smog line, and there's a part of us longing for that purpose, and we may have circumstances where we, in our mind, think we can just all I can take to get through the day. All I can do to breathe even sometimes. And so, as they say, there's the rub. Spiritual purpose and growth often happens when you're just not up to it. You know what I'm saying? You know when I'm really up to spiritual growth? When I've been on a retreat for a week, like at the beach at Monterey. Boy, anything's joyful, isn't it? Especially when we used to have our annual retreat with Central Spiritual Living in Monterey, and they would feed you 3 meals a day, and you'd walk the beach every day. How can you not be full of joy? I mean, really. I remember I'd get home, it's like, I have to cook? Can't someone just cook 3 meals a day for me anymore? And, it's just like, you really get used to that. But you come back, and again, you start to come to terms with your own version of the smog line, and to what extent you live underneath that. And that the real work we do is when we're having to face that ickiness that has made its way into our life. And this is where, as we say, we are always at choice. And this is where choice is most important. When we are mesmerized by our own smog line, to have something in our consciousness to say, I can actually start to choose something different. And it's difficult, because the discords and the old tapes we have in our brain are so compelling. They are so compelling. And you have to make, in these moments, a conscious choice to just not do that anymore. And here are the usual things that happen under the smog line. That same argument that you have in your head with your neighbor, your sister, your parent, even they may even be dead at this point, but you're still having that conversation. And you imagine yourself winning the conversation, but you don't really win, because the next morning you're having the conversation again in your head. You're like, oh, I'll show them, this is what I'll say. So that's under the smog line kind of behavior and thinking. So spiritual growth comes in those moments where you say, enough. Even if it's not necessarily getting to a higher energetic level, but just evening it out almost in neutral. It's enough. I've actually, with myself in those moments, it seems like, who are these crazy people in my head, realizing that it's just me, that I've actually just yelled at myself when I'm alone. Like, just stop it already, John. Enough. You've had this conversation 20 times today. You've heard it already. You don't need to do this one anymore. I mean, really, you've got it. And it almost takes it physically and energetic like that to like pop me out of it, sort of thing. So driving in your car or something, yell at yourself. It's kind of a good way to just pop yourself out of it and make a different choice. And in those small choices, I know at first they are so difficult sometimes to make, because we're so accustomed to just going with that level of negativity in our own minds. But if you have this idea of getting past thinking something has to happen to make you happy, that's really it. Because those type of inner conversations are all about external somehow meeting your high expectations of your ego, and that somehow would make you happy. And it doesn't, because we've got more conversations to follow that if you resolve that one. So that's, when we talk about spiritual growth, it's, in a sense, that simple, not easy, but simple, of what is engaging in a different way what's going on in your head. And I would imagine most of you, if not all of you, have a lot of things roaming around in there as a residue from this last year and a half or so. We all have opinions. I'm right, you're wrong. We all take in the same information and come up with completely different conclusions, and are really sure that anyone's come up with a different conclusion is inherently just bonkers. So that's a conversation to give up in your brain. Oh, that's a scary one to give up, isn't it? I could be wrong. Oh my God. So this week, your homework is notice what are those recurring things that are coming up that's seeking, very cleverly your engagement again, that have nothing to do about anything. What things are coming up that, again, you have been engaging not just for days, but possibly even for years in your brain? You can really let it go. It's really okay. You've really gotten that conversation. You've worked it out. You've had it thousands of times. It's really okay to make a different choice. It really is. And so, if you're sitting here today, you've probably thought growing spiritually would be a good thing. And hoping that it would be, not that easy, but here's your 10-point plan. You don't have to change. Here's a magazine cover. Just wear the same outfit. But where it really happens is in here. And that's what can make it at times seem so difficult. That we have to just look at, in this simple way, from what I read in this book this week, to transition from thinking things need to make you happy to that you actually have the capability of spontaneous joy and gratitude at all times. Just end with one more quote that David had to say about this. It says, happiness fades. We get used to the things that used to make us happy. Joy doesn't fade. To live with joy is to live with wonder, gratitude, and hope. People who are in the second mountain have been transformed. So let's just take this to prayer for a moment. First, let us just give our gratitude for spontaneous joy. There is so much good happening right here and right now. There's a new family that got formed yesterday that are in love with each other. And I celebrate that. There are so many things that we aren't even aware of that are so joyful and joy-filled this morning that all we have to do is affirm and open ourselves up to be receptive and to recognize that they're happening right in our midst. That we can let go of the things that we have allowed ourselves to carry that no longer serve us. In fact, they never served us. That, in a sense, we can aspire and be part of that second mountain consciousness wherever we are. We choose something different. We let go and relinquish other people's responsibility of making us happy. It never happened in the first place, so we let it go. And so as we move forward, we allow ourselves to be fully present. We allow ourselves to live at a higher vibration. And we allow ourselves to be the ones to share and to model that amazing behavior of gratitude and joy and greater purpose. We claim it for ourselves. And so in this, we just simply give thanks. And as we give thanks, as in all things, we let it go. We let go of our attachment. We don't need to know how this all shows up. We just let it go and let miracles happen. And so it is.